folks, welcome back to the Broken Meeple. This is another video review on the YouTube channel, and today we're continuing Co-op Month by taking a look at Ghost Stories by Repos Productions. Ghost Stories is a cooperative game where you are 4 monks having to defend a village set in a sort of Asian theme from Wu Feng and his army of ghosts. They are laying siege to this village, and you have to fend them off, exercising all the different types of ghosts whilst using whatever villager aid you can at your disposal, and of course rolling dice in order to beat the ghost and eventually find Wu Feng himself and kill him off. Now, Ghost Stories itself is not as widely well known, I must admit, as certain other games. It's pretty high up in the BoardGameGeek rankings, but you don't seem to see many people owning it. So hopefully this review and the how to play video that should have gone up shortly before this one will give you a bit of an insight into how this game works, what it's like, and what I think of it as a whole, should you add it to your collection for Co-op Month. So without further ado, let's make a start. First up, I'm going to talk about component quality with this Ghost Stories box and insides. Repos Production hit it on the nail when it comes to component quality in most of their games. I mean, you've only got to look at examples like Seven Wonders, for example, to see what they can do when you slap a bit of colour on something. Ghost Stories is no exception. I mean, you can see from the front of the box here that it already looks pretty striking just from the box cover. And if you look at my how to play video, you can see what it looks like when it's out on the table, and it looks gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. There's just colour everywhere, everything's sturdy, everything's well made, there's nothing flimsy, the cards are good stock, the artwork is fantastic. I cannot fault this on component quality, except, well, okay, I'm going to have to be a tiny bit honest with one bit. The dice are a little bit of a letdown. Everything else in here is gorgeous, colourful, well made, and sturdy. The dice, however, are just pretty plain. They are just very tiny little white die with coloured spots on them to represent what you need to roll in order to exercise the ghost. It would have been nice if they could have done symbols, maybe. That would have been a bit more interesting. And something I've found out with the dice is that they're almost very, I suppose sticky, the right word? I found that over lots of handling, you know, you've got sweat on your hands and you'll roll the dice, they tend to pick up dust and grime quite easily, and they're mostly white. So you do tend to sort of feel them and go, you know, and chuck them down. So you have to give them a bit of a wipe every now and again just to get rid of that monk off. It's a small nitpick, and it's just for the dice. Everything else looks absolutely gorgeous, absolutely stunning to look at on the table. It doesn't matter if you're playing with 1 or 4 players, it's just gorgeous. So component quality is 2 thumbs up on that from Repos Production, as per usual. To learn this game is actually not very difficult. The rulebook is not extensively long. However, I would say a caveat on that is that it's worded a little bit on the ambiguous side. There are some paragraphs in that rulebook where you're thinking, okay, what does that mean? I'm not entirely certain. However, it does make up for this in spades with the amount of diagrams that it has to help you with those rules. So if you couldn't get it from the wording, you should be able to get it from the diagrams. But even then, you know, you look on the back of the rulebook and it's got the turn sequence there. And if you look at that without knowing much about the game, it's going to look a little bit daunting, even though the turn sequence is actually quite simple. So the rulebook is a little bit, you might have to read it once or twice maybe just to get your head around it. But otherwise, it's not too bad. And again, this game is not a difficult one. You've essentially got 2 phases of a turn, the yin and yang phase. The yin phase is when you do everything with the ghost, the yang phase is when you do everything with your monk, and there's usually only about 2 things a turn that you actually have to do in each of those phases, so it's really not that difficult to get into. Is it an entry-level co-op? I think so. I mean, we're not talking gateway levels of Forbidden Island Desert and Pandemic and Flashpoint Fire Rescue, but this is certainly the next step up. It's not a difficult game to learn, but it's certainly a difficult one to master. Oh boy, is it a difficult one to master. Most games can be hard, and a co-op should be challenging. It should challenge you and make it so that you can't win it every time, so that you keep coming back and go, right, I'm going to beat the stupid game. But most co-ops have a sort of difficulty scaling rating that, you can beat it maybe on the first difficulty, and then, unless you put it up to like the highest difficulty rating, you're probably going to beat it and it's not too much of a problem. Ghost Stories is a slightly different example. Most games you'll get into it and then it will slap you around a bit sort of halfway through and it's like, oh, and then we finish, that's okay. Ghost Stories is a little bit different. Ghost Stories is more of a case of you pick it off the shelf and it's like, this is a cool little game. Alright, I'll buy that. Right guys, sitting around, we're going to play a bit of Ghost Stories here. Let's just get this lid off and then, this game slaps you around the second you open this box. It's that tough of a game. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you don't like a game to be too challenging, then maybe you might want to hesitate a little bit and maybe try before you buy on this one. But it is hard. There are 4 difficulty ratings in this game, and the basic initiation level is still pretty tough. Normal difficulty is what I'm on now. I can beat it alright on initiation at this point, but after that, you've got, I think, Nightmare and Hell, or something like that. And Hell? Honestly, you look at what Hell difficulty is like with this game, and it's just an advertisement for masochism. Because you would not want to play that difficulty unless you really were just out for pain. This thing will, initiation, this can be quite challenging. Normal, this thing will slap you around silly, and then leave you with a sore cheek. The difficulty above that, which I think is Nightmare, will slap you around and then shoot you in the chest before it leaves. And Hell difficulty is the equivalent of being slapped around, shot in the chest, and then having your corpse set on fire. It's that tough of a setting. I mean, if anybody is able to beat it on that setting, then fair play to you. You've done well, and I commend you for it, but I ain't got to that level yet. But despite that, it's still fun to play, because this game just racks up the tension from minute 1. You start off and you'll be thinking, it's like, okay, there's a couple of ghosts, right, fend them off, no problem, we can do this. And then literally about 5 minutes later, the ghosts start swarming in numbers, and it's like, okay, right, get back, come on, right, move, get rid of them and that. And then by the time you sort of get about another 5 minutes later, it's like, please stop coming. It's just, they just come at you relentlessly and force you to really work as a team and rely on a bit of luck. You are rolling dice. You've got to accept that there is a bit of luck involved in order to beat these ghosts. And it's just, I mean, the first game I played of this, I kid you not, I never played such a fun, tense co-op game in my life than that first game of Ghost Stories. I ended up having to literally do things by the what's the word I'm looking for? Literally last straw, or like the nick of time, that kind of thing. And by the end of the game, 2 others in our group had died. My guy was one off dying, and we'd come across Wu Feng, but I had no chance of beating him. Only my colleague did. So I literally went to a village tile, which allowed you to lose a life to kill a ghost. I sacrificed my life because I only have 1 life left, killed myself to kill the ghost that was affecting my colleague, just so he could get 1 more roll at the boss, so that we could end up with a posthumous victory. Unfortunately, he didn't roll what was needed and we all died. But it was just, even though we lost, it's just a blast when this thing gets tense. And, you'll be looking at it, it will be gorgeous as you're doing it, and, you want a game to test you, this is a good contender. As with most co-op games, you're looking at whether this game can be played well in a group, and whether it can be played solo, and how much time it takes. Now, in a group, this plays very well from 2 to 4 players. The game scales up as you go from 2 to 4, so it doesn't necessarily feel easier with 2 or harder with 4, for example. But it works perfectly fine with that, with so many players. And time length is not that bad, actually. I mean, the box says 60 minutes, and that's not too bad, actually. I'd reckon a 2-player game should easily finish in an hour. No problem. 3 players, maybe. And 3 players should be able to do it in 60 if they're experienced. 4 players, you're probably looking at between 60 to 90. There's no reason this game should ever take more than 90 minutes unless you are really going slow and thinking about what you're doing, because this game can be wrapped up pretty quickly. And that's with 4 players, including inexperienced gamers. So you should be able to get this out in under an hour and a half without too much trouble, and that's a bonus point. The other thing is that this is, like most co-op games, can be played solo, and the solo game works slightly differently to the normal rules. There are different changes in the rules which can be a bit fiddly to get your head around when you're changing from literally just your one monk to having 2, 3 or 4. I find that the best way to play this game solo is to just simply have more than one monk at your disposal. I mean, I've played this solo most of the time with 4 monks, so I have a big full game going. And it can take me a little while, but it's good fun and it's still quite challenging. But if you really want to get this out quick, then you probably might just control 2 monks and follow the normal rules. It really doesn't matter if you do that or just follow the basic solo mission. It's still slap you silly, no matter which way you do it. So, in terms of that, game length and players, it's fine. But it is a maximum of 4. There is no way you can get 5 in this game, and some co-ops are better at doing more players in that respect. Although, to be honest, there aren't that many co-op games I can think of where I would want to play the game 5 players anyway, because 5 players and up tends to be that borderline where it just drags on too much. You could play a 5-player game of, I suppose, Flashpoint and Forbidden Desert aren't too bad with 5 players. They can, take a relatively short time. 5-player Marvel Legendary, you are just asking to get beat, and it can drag a fair extent. Eldritch Horror and Arkham Horror, you would not play that with 5 players. It is just mental. It would take far too long and be just a ridiculous challenge as well. So 4 players is pretty a good happy medium, especially for something like this, which is simple to teach and get into, but still tough. But it works perfectly well with 2 players. I mean, I would happily bring this out if there was just literally 2 of us spare and I wanted to play a co-op game. It works just fine. So what's the final verdict for this game then? Well, Ghost Stories, like I say, it looks absolutely gorgeous. Everything from the box to the components to, the insert is rubbish. The insert is just your typical sort of folded up bits of cardboard. You pretty much just chuck that out the second you get it. But otherwise, other than the dice issue, every component in here, every part of the box is just gorgeous and colourful to look at. They really have gone to town with the design of this game. It's accessible for even new gamers. It is a fairly short game. It can be played 1 to 4 players, so you can play it by yourself and get plenty of bang for your buck. I just would say that you have to go into this knowing that this is a tough game. This game is going to slap you around, and if you don't like games that are too hard to beat or too much of a challenge, then this may not be the game you're looking for. And if you're thinking of teaching this to younger kids, it is a 10 plus rating game, but you have to accept that it's going to be tough. So if your children or younger players are not too keen on games that they can't win, again, you might have to look elsewhere. Just accept that this is going to be tough, but it's a fun challenge. This is not so tough that you play it out just going, I'm going to lose this. You're not going to get bummed out over it. You will be loving every second of this game when you are playing it and when it's slapping you around, because it just makes the inevitable victory that you will get. You will beat this game at some point, and it's going to feel good. You are going to just find Wu Feng, you're going to go to him, you're going to get that lad die roll, you're going to punch him in the face, and you're going to be tweeting about it and God knows what else, boasting about your victory over Wu Feng, especially if you've done it on a harder difficulty. But to be fair, if you have done this on Nightmare in Hell, get in touch. I want to know, and I want to see proof. I want video evidence that you played this game correctly, got all the rules right, and beat it on Nightmare in Hell. Because I need to give you a medal for that. Because that is just... I can't imagine how you would beat this on those levels. I'd prefer to do those difficulties on a kind of like time trial thing. So you play and see how far you can get before you die and count the number of ghosts in the pack. That could work. That's not a bad idea, actually. Might try that at some point. Actually, to be fair, I've got enough games here if I want a masochist thing to go for. But in the end, this is a quality game. It's not that expensive. I believe you can pick this up for around the... maximum you should pay for this game is about £35. I think if you get lucky on the website, you should be able to get it for around 30. I don't think it's going for any less than that unless you go on eBay, but to be fair, that's not that bad a price tag for a game in general. You are getting quality in terms of components, minus the dice thing, yes, but that's a really minor nibble. And it also has 2 expansions to its name as well. I have not played or tried the Black Secret, which is the most recent expansion, but I'm not too keen on getting that because it feels like it's changing the game a bit too much for my liking. But I don't know, I wouldn't be opposed to giving it a shot, and I'll see what it's like. But I do have the first expansion that this has come with, which is, if I put it down there, White Moon. Now, I'm going to be doing a separate review on this, so hopefully it will, well, we'll soon find out. I tested it last night. I'm going to test it a few more times this month on solo and group games, and we'll see how it fares up. But I'm excited to see how much that changes the game, hopefully, for the better. But that's my review of Ghost Stories. It's a quality co-op game. If you like co-ops and fancy a challenge, then this is a must-buy. It's in, I think it's like 133 on BoardGameGeek. It's deservedly so of that rating. It's quality, everything looks gorgeous, it's a challenge, works with any number of players, is relatively quick. Check out also Tom Vassell and Z Garcia on the Dice Tower. They absolutely praise this game. I believe they always have this in like their top 3 odd co-op games of all time every time they mention it, and it's there for a reason. It's just a great game. So happy I've now got it in my collection. It took me far too long before I made the jump to buy it, and it's going to stay on the shelf and it's going to remain there as long as it can. So that's my review of Ghost Stories. You've been watching Luke Hector on the Broken Meeple. Take care, and I'll see you soon for the next review.